So I now get the absolute pleasure of introducing Susanne Clemons. Susan, as I shared with you, and as you heard from Lance, our history goes back quite a ways and continues through this day. And when we're not traveling or playing or having a good time on the telephone talking about the latest recipes we've tried, Susan is involved heavily in her community and actually, you know, in government, in the state, and everything else. She's going to talk to you today from her role as the chair person for the state of Florida Fair Authority Board, but she's also the chairman of the Florida House Board of Trustees. If you are not from Florida or familiar with Florida, Florida is the only state that has its only residential, or I shouldn't say residential, but a home. It's actually behind the Supreme Court. And so if you're a Floridian and need to have a meeting, or, you know, if you're one of the government officials and need to host people, the Florida House takes care of you. And Susan is the chair of that board. She has been with on the foundation for the Indian River State College. She and her husband, Pete, she worked beside him at the Okeechobee Livestock Market for many years. And so but I have to tell a story. When y'all were talking about Rotarians, her daddy was a lifetime Rotarian. And I looked up today because I asked Lance last night, I said, didn't Mr. and Miss Hancock come to visit us in Germany when they had gone to Germany for the Rotary International Convention? Lance said, I'm not positive. So this morning I Googled, and sure enough, I'm positive they were with us in 1987 because we had just arrived in Germany. And sure enough, the Munich hosted the Rotary International Convention 7 through 10 June 1987, which would have been right after we arrived. So I'm pretty sure they drove from Munich over to Stuttgart to visit us. So Susan's familiar with Rotary. She's familiar with service. She understands what it takes for a community to come together to put something on, for a state to come together, for teams to come together. So I am very excited to hear more about the state fair. Many of us have been to the state fair, and as I said in what I put out on Monday, you know, unfortunately, you know, what comes to mind first are corn dogs, cotton candy, and, you know, all that good stuff. But there's a lot more to it, and there's a lot that state fairs offer and a lot that we can learn from that. So with that, I am going to turn the program over to Susan. I am going to drive the slides for her. So while she begins, I will get those loaded up. Susan, thank you so much for being with us today and for presenting to us. And I think you're muted.
Unmute. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Well, I hate to follow Lene. It's very intimidating.
Oh,
but I'm glad to be here, and I've actually been at your meetings in the past when we've been traveling. I think the last one we were in Key West, and you had a Rotary meeting, and you introduced me. And I am always happy to talk about the state of Florida. I'm a fifth generation Floridian. I have been on the fair board for 5 years and have been chair for 3. And the roots of of all the state fairs in the country are in their agriculture. And in my life, I'm a citrus grower, and my late husband was a cattle rancher and owned a livestock market, and we owned a dairy at one time. And so I've lived in Okeechobee, which is on the north side of the Big Lake, the headwaters of the Florida Everglades. And yes, there is an alligator in my backyard right at the moment. I've had them in my garage. I've had them in my front yard. So we live around them. But anyway, Lake Okeechobee is farm country and bass fishing. That's what we're known for. But like most of Florida, we are in danger of becoming a metropolitan area. And I hope that doesn't happen. Okay. Next slide. The state, that's our Commissioner of Agriculture. He was just elected. Prior to that, he was the president of the Florida Senate, but he's an egg farmer. He has over 1 million laying hens close to Tampa, and he's got a wicked sense of humor. So we are glad to have an ag person that's our leader at the state fair. The fair is located in Tampa, Florida. Most of you, if you've been to Florida, you've probably been there. Their roots were in agriculture, but I think originally in cigars. They were promoting their cigar business. And Henry Plant, who built the railroad on the west coast of Florida, he started the fair to gain business for his hotel in downtown Tampa, which is now the University of Tampa. It was held in conjunction with Gasparilla, which is Tampa's, like, their carnival in the wintertime, where pirates attack the city and are given the key to the city, and it's a jolly good time. So anyway, you want to change the slide to there. We're now located in 1977. The fair was moved to the current location, which was probably way out in the middle of nowhere at the time, but now it's at right on Interstate 4 and across the road from the Seminole Hard Rock Casino. So it's quite a busy intersection. You can turn right and go to the fair, turn left and go gamble at the casino. So anyway, that's where we are today. And the fair, our campus, if you want to switch now, is 335 acres. All right, that we do make a profit. We do not have a recurring line item in the state budget. So we have to pay our own way. And there are over 250, okay, move on, 250 non-fair events at the fairgrounds, including the biggest motorhome show in the United States. And if you've never seen a $4 million motorhome, we'll come out in January to our motorhome show. And they wouldn't let me in because I had to do a credit check to make sure I was a viable buyer, which indeed I wasn't. So no, I'm just kidding, but that's really true. We have gun shows regularly. We have a lot of equestrian events. And okay, move on, Lene. And there is a huge economic event, impact, not only because of the fair, but of the events that go on all year long. And so if the livestock barn is about half a mile from the donut stand, which is important because after I eat a donut about this big around, I've got to walk it off several times. Anyway, that tells you a little bit about our assets. It's a constant maintenance, as you can imagine. When we make money, we reinvest it back in our facility. And I will say it's never looked better than it does today. So, okay. We also showcase rural Florida and our Living History Museum, which is called Cracker Country. And the Florida natives are called crackers because most of them were in the cattle business, and that they cracked their whips when they were rounding up the cattle. So that's why we call ourselves crackers. But there at Cracker Country, all of the buildings that are there have been moved and historically preserved from other places in Florida. There's a train station, there's a grist mill, there's a home that the Carlton home, and they had 9 sons, the Carlton family, one of whom went on to be the governor of Florida. And there are a lot of school children that go through Cracker Country, and I think it's just a great way to preserve our heritage in Florida, because most people don't equip Florida to agriculture. It's, Disney World, which was a cattle ranch when Walt Disney came to town. So we like to think we are doing this to preserve our way of life and our living history. We have a equestrian center, and I tell you, it was very important during Hurricane Ian. Well, any big hurricane that impacts the coast of Florida, because all the horses can be evacuated to the fair, because Tampa's never been flooded. Now, I hate to say that, we could be next, but we were full of horses during the storm, and Florida Power and Light trucks. So it's very important to the area. But also the equestrian business, as you know, is an important economic driver in any state. So we're glad to help, and we do that free of charge. I think, if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them from everyone but Lance. We do have been voted the best midway many times. We are not the biggest fair in the country. Texas and Minnesota can claim that title. We're in the top tier, but it is the entertainment. I think we have great entertainment, and one of the reasons that we do is when John Ringling moved the circus headquarters to Sarasota. Of course, the circus, there's not a Ringling Brothers anymore, but a lot of the circus performers stayed and lived in the area. So we have some really great entertainment at our fair. We also have entertainment that comes over from Disney. We have live music, we have tightrope, we have circus. There's something really for everybody. And we get really good media coverage. And what I've learned, and y'all probably know this too, is social media is a way to sell out an event in this day and time. And it's cheap. And so I think that has been a driving force to our increased attendance over the last couple of years. We were the last fair in the country before COVID restrictions set in. So we didn't lose that year, but it, really impacted what we were able to do the next year. But after COVID, I think everybody wanted to get out, and we had the biggest fair we've ever had. So anyway, and we have great media coverage in Tampa. And that helps a lot too. We also are on the Fairgrounds is the permanent home of the 500 Years of Cattle Ranching exhibit. And cattle came, of course, to the United States with the Spanish, and they came to Florida first. Now, they may have more cows in Texas, but we had them first. And I think we're number 9 in the number of mother cows in the country, the 9th largest state. And we have some of the largest ranches in the country are in Florida. And the largest one being Likes Brothers, which is 337,000 acres. And it's right down here near where I live. So and we do have a member of their family on our board. Every fair, okay, you can go on. Every fair, even your county fairs, have to have a livestock show. And we have 45 of 67 counties representative. And there are cows in every county in Florida, except maybe in Monroe County, which are the Florida Keys. These are young people. Our FFA and 4-H are very engaged. And I'm telling you, if you want to see some good kids, look at 4-H and FFA young people. They are just outstanding. But here's an interesting thing that I think sets our fair apart. Back in the 90s, George Steinbrenner was the chairman of the State Fair Authority. And you probably recognize him in the New York Yankees, but he lived in Tampa, and he was in the shipping business here. So the first time, he's a micromanager. He's very well known for that. But the first year he came out to the fair and went to the livestock show and the livestock sale, which was active live bidding on the animals that these young people had raised for the fair, mainly the steers. And some kids got $5 a pound, some kids got $1.50. Some of them, if their grandpa was there, they got $20 a pound. And he thought that was terrible. So he completely changed the whole protocol for the livestock sale. And now the kids work all year long. They earn points for their community service. They earn points for their record books and how well they do with their animal and how well they keep their animal groomed. And the money is raised within the Fair Authority and put up by the Fair Authority. And whoever has the most points is the champion of champions. And that's thanks to George Steinbrenner. He thought it was terrible that anyone would play favorites where young people were concerned. And I think we're the only state that has that program, but we're very proud of it. Does anybody have a question? Yes, ma'am.
So I grew up in Alaska, and I have to say the state fair was in my hometown, and it was probably about as big as most county fairs are because it was Alaska, but it was still, but we have the biggest cabbages ever. But then when I was in school in California and living there, the California State Fair did something that I was wondering if the Florida one did, where they had a county building where each county had a display, and you put on the display, you know, what your county is known for, like what grows there, and obviously all the different things that are grown from the northern to the southern part of California. And it was a fascinating way to learn about the state and where and how much grows there. Like I didn't know so much beef was grown in Florida and raised in Florida. And so walking around this county building from California, not growing up there, you start to realize the diversity of where our food comes from. And so that was probably my favorite fair exhibit every year, was to go and see what the counties would put out. And so I didn't know if they had something like that at the Florida Fair where they feature things that are grown in different parts of the state. Or
years ago, we had every county had an exhibit, and it just fell by the wayside, I think lack of interest on the county's parts, finding someone to do it. You had to stay there someone had to be there for 12 days. But we do feature our agricultural products, which oranges is the number one. I don't know for how much longer. They're stressed by development and disease. Strawberries, and the fair takes place during our strawberry season. So there's strawberry everything you would ever want to try to eat. Cattle, honey. We have a big ornamental plant industry in Florida. And we're also the #1 sugar producing state. And that sugar cane is all grown south of Lake Okeechobee and in Palm Beach County. And when you think about Palm Beach County, you think about Palm Beach. But Palm Beach is the #1 agriculture county east of the Mississippi River. And that's because of sugarcane, bell peppers, green beans, sweet corn. In the wintertime, on the eastern seaboard, the green beans and corn come from Palm Beach County. And there go a lot of bell peppers. Also, if you ever seen a caladium, all of the caladiums are grown in the county where Lance and I are from. And they, Hurricane Ian wiped out the whole caladium crop this year. And one of the growers told me at the fair they had to cancel $1 million in orders. So, and it wasn't the rain, it was the wind that destroyed the crop. So we do highlight those products. And agriculture is the second largest industry in Florida and the most stable. When you have a downturn economically, your tourism drops off. But agriculture, people have to eat. And I don't know about you, but I am sufficiently uncomfortable knowing all our food supply would come from outside the United States. So I think it's very important that we maintain our cropland, our fallow cropland, and that we can feed the people in our country. I think it's a matter of national security. But as Alaska, I used to serve on a committee for the USDA, and I met a strawberry grower from Alaska. And I think they had about a growing of 1 month when they could grow their berries, but they were big, they were sweet, but he said they're so expensive. And he came down to Florida to Plant City, which is really the heart of our strawberry area, and he could buy an entire flat for like $6, and he just couldn't believe it. But he told me he took his kids out of school in the month of January because it was so depressing. It was dark all the time, and they went to Hawaii, and I thought, golly, that sounds pretty good to me. Yeah.
Susan, well, we did grow strawberries at home too, and you're right. They grow in a very short time, and they're very sweet, but we grew enough to make about a pie and a few batches of jam.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Susan, I have a quick comment. I'm from upstate New York, Syracuse area. And if there's ever a state that most people would not think has agriculture when they think about New York, is New York State. I mean, I've gone many, many years. It's right after Labor Day, around Labor Day. I mean, it features agriculture that most people would have no idea New York State is that strong in agriculture.
Well, my husband and I used to go up there and buy dairy cattle. And also, the famous Blue Lake green beans come from New York. And we used to have neighbors down in the Keys that were farmers in New York and they'd spend 6 months a year because they only farmed 6 months a year. But no, it's like when most of the 80% of the people in Florida live within 10 miles of the coast. So the rest of us in the interior, are raising cattle, growing oranges. It's a very different way of life. But when people get to the fair, I don't care what age person it is, they want to see the animals.
Mhm.
They want to go to the cow barn. They want to see the chickens and the rabbits. And we have a petting zoo for the children. And I would venture to say that's one of the most popular places for the kids to be. They're fascinated. There's llamas and goats, and I don't want to get in there and pet those things, but boy, those little kids sure do. And I think it's eye-opening. It really is. But, you know, being a farmer is a big responsibility. And, you know, you can be broke overnight. And my husband used to say, if you hadn't been broke twice, you're not trying hard enough. So, you know, like I said, I love to talk about Florida, and I love to talk about Florida agriculture. But the
And
fair is, you know, fair is a business, but it is a way for us to showcase our way of life. And I'm just glad to have the opportunity to be a part of it, to tell you the truth. It's one of the more fun things I do. Of course, when one of the rides got stuck up in the air during the fair this year, and they had to unload the people on with a forklift. And so I just bragged on social media. Now I'm going to take that back and say it was all over the internet, the people being unloaded from the ride on the forklift. So it didn't really work in our favor on that particular day.
Candace,
So,
I think you
Yeah, I have a quick comment and then a question. So I was very grateful to Florida Agriculture this week, specifically because we grow a lot of sweet banana peppers, and then I pickle them. And last month we completely ran out of our sweet pickled peppers. And so I went over to our local farm stand and was able to get 5 pounds of sweet banana peppers that had come up off on the truck from Florida the other morning, and spent the weekend pickling. So thank you very much, because otherwise we would have had to wait till like August or September for our pickled peppers.
I'm glad we could help.
Yeah, thank you very much. The question is, and it's related to the sugar. We have spent many winters down off of Singer Island, you know, Palm Beach Shores area, and have often seen the sugarcane fields burned off, which is really dramatic and interesting. But I know that there's some issues with Lake Okeechobee and drainage and the Everglades and all of that, and I know a lot of the sugar is grown. What's that going to look like?
For 35 years, when I have when I've lived down here, that's been an ongoing. There's sugar growers pay an extra, I think it's $25 an acre tax to mitigate the runoff issues, but there is legacy phosphorus coming down from as far away as Disney World into Lake Okeechobee. And there's a river and about 40 years ago, it was channelized by the Corps of Engineers. It was a wild river. It was parts of it wasn't navigable. That's not a word, but the river was put back in its natural state. I mean, you can't imagine how much that cost. It in with the land with a lot of the dirt that they channelized it from. So all that phosphorus as the federal government to retain the water and treat it before it heads south into the Everglades, because the Everglades truly is a river of grass, and it filters the water before it goes into Florida Bay. World. And if you come to Okeechobee, I'll take you out on an airboat and show you there's no place like Lake Okeechobee, so big it makes its own weather. And especially in the winter and the springtime, we have a lot of roseate spoonbills here out on. We have the white pelicans that I know I sound like a travel log, but I'm just very proud of my.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Susan?
I have some comments.
Okay.
Susan? Yes.
Yes.
We've, my wife and I lived in Boca Raton. Recently moved to South Carolina because of health issues, and our son lived here. We've been here about 2 years. I was the chairman of the Growth Management Committee for the Florida Association of the American Institute of Architects.
Wow.
That was 5 generations. And so I hear you talk about this urbanization, and I grew up in Los Angeles, my wife and I didn't know that streets didn't have curbs. And when we were in elementary school, and it was my first experience with farm animals. So
Yeah.
I've gone from that kind of culture to having moved to Florida in 1973 and being an architect. I have always balanced this challenge of growth versus preserving the history. So I population is growing. And the challenge is, how do you preserve this culture and still, and you're doing a marvelous job of preserving it in the state fair. And so I just want to thank you for technology, and how does the state fair, incorporate technology, because that's where the world is headed. So that's my question.
This is true. We showcase technology per se, because the mission of the state fair is showcasing agriculture, but we do have contests for young people. We encourage that. We encourage that for sure, because you can either, it's like being in business, and my our former lieutenant governor, I was at a meeting with her one day, and she says, you know what I decided? I was CEO of a building contract firm, and I decided right away, you either have to get into politics or get out of business. Or we'll be left behind. So we have a new IT person at the fair, and we stole him from NASCAR, and they weren't too happy about it. But he's more really interesting. Oh, I know. One of the ways we are preserving our agriculture land is through conservation easements. And the USDA, from the state of Florida, from rural development, but one we and it runs really from down south of the lake all the way up to the Panhandle. And if you get a chance, look for the movie Path of the Panther. And I saw it that habitat for the panther and the black bear. So because they do migrate, and there are really not many panthers left in Florida. Collier County, which is Naples, that's being encroached by development. So I think you'd enjoy Path of the Panther. A very good friend of mine was instrumental for the movie. His name is Carl. So if you want to learn more about the Everglades, that is a great movie to look for.
Susan,
But anyway, you can still raise cattle, but it can never be developed. So, but for the landowner has to have some kind of compensation, because $40,000 an acre, you'd be hard pressed not to take it. So that is a way we are working with government to preserve our farmland and our green space.
Susan, I lived in Fort Myers, and when I lived down there, I was one of the founding board members of Panther Community Bank in Lehigh.
Were you really?
So I learned a lot about panthers, and each of us as board members, when we opened the bank officially, got one of his paintings.
Oh, really?
Award, yeah. In fact, I think we had him
Yeah.
to an event. So.
I lived in Fort Myers for 13 years myself, and still have a lot of contacts there. And I have friends now. Ian was last September, and I have friends that if they live close to the Caloosahatchee, they were very impacted by the storm.
Yep.
And they're still not back in their houses.
Yep.
So
we too have a lot of friends down there, and we're going down in October, November to see a lot of the folks down there.
good. Is your bank still in business?
Now it was acquired by the Naples Bank, Gary Tice's bank, which has since sold too. So it's gone, and
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's what happens to
I know.
Panthers.
I know. I work for Barnett Bank. You probably remember Barnett.
I do.
Yeah, well, it's not around anymore either. Well, I know that I'm the only thing standing between you and lunch.
Hold on just a second. Julie Tovey had her hand up. Julie, we do have time for one more question. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Suzanne, my question is about small farmers. I'm going to represent California again. And I grew up in the Salinas Valley of California on a small farm. And I think from your perspective, we've heard a lot about the conservation easements are amazing. And how large agriculture is keeping Florida afloat in many ways, but there are also small farmers that are having to deal with a lot of different things. And does the fair have programs to keep those small farms, family farms alive?
Family farm, yeah, and we have a program in Florida. If you have owned your land and been farming for a century, we have a special designation. And for these farms, there are a lot of small farmers in Florida, and there are a lot of row crops in Florida.
Mm.
And there are also especially down as you head south. In fact, I noticed, have you ever heard of a lychee nut?
Yeah.
The lychees are ripe right now, and it's the prettiest thing you've ever seen to drive by those. The trees are just gigantic, and those berries have turned red. I mean, you're talking a 50-foot tall tree just covered in red berries. So, and a lychee grove might be 5 or 10 acres in the Homestead area. And they grow a lot of fruit down there because of the number of Hispanics in Florida, the jackfruit, mangoes, avocados, key limes, and they're not large farms at all.
Mm.
And our ornamental farms aren't either.
Right.
And blueberry farms aren't either. And a lot of citrus growers have transitioned into blueberries because of the disease that they just don't seem to be able to find a cure for here.
Mm. Thank you.
Susan,
Thank you for your question.
Susan, this has been absolutely fascinating, and we just really appreciate the heart and soul that you put into the presentation, and the heart and soul that you certainly put into the Florida State Fair. And thank you for sharing it with us. I just really appreciate it. What we like to do is to thank our speakers. We support one of the, you heard talk about the areas of focus of Rotary. One area of focus of Rotary is Little Free Libraries. And so we like to donate something to the Little Free Library. And so, I know the focus is agriculture, but looking at young children and getting their interest in reading, I found this book on the history of the Ferris wheel, and I must be the only one not to know what the history of it is. But I was, the
first Ferris wheel at the Chicago State Fair, Fair?
It was. And do you know why it was? They were looking for something to rival the previous World Fair, which was the Eiffel Tower. Yes, the Eiffel Tower in Paris. And it was the architects were looking to see what they could do. And it was an engineer architect named George Washington Gale Ferris Jr. And the author of this book, Catherine Gibbs Davis, is supposed to be just really good at taking history and putting it in terms for young children. She also wrote The Wacky White House Pet that Barbara Bush is famous for reading out loud to children. So this book, Mr.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It will go into some little free library somewhere in recognition and in honor, and to say thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you. And when you come to the fair, we have an enormous Ferris wheel. After you get your corn dog, we'll ride the Ferris wheel.
That sounds good.
And I just wanted to mention the fair food that won Best of Show last year was, in Tampa claims they invented the Cuban sandwich. Was a funnel cake Cuban.
Oh my goodness. That's got Lance written all over it.
All right. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Susan.
I've enjoyed it. Bye-bye.
We enjoyed your being here. And for all of us, so thanks to everybody for tuning in today. If you'll